So, for people dealing with a lot of trauma, we often hear that it's important to talk about it to other people. But I've found, and I've heard from experts like today's expert, that sometimes talk therapy doesn't always work with people who are dealing with certain types of trauma. So, welcome to today's guest, Delane. And can you tell people who you are, a little bit about your background, which is fascinating, and maybe talk about why talk therapy doesn't work for every case?
Sure. So well, I'm a licensed art therapist and an integrative health coach and a Shackley ambassador. So, what I do today pulls together those things, which is great. So, I grew up in a Shackley family, like health food store people before that was cool.
I remember those
Way
health groups.
way before Whole Foods,
Yeah.
Uh, so I've had the benefit of a lifetime of great nutrition. So there's that stream. And then my mom started our health and wellness business, partnered with Shackley, and I went off to college and created a whole different career as an art therapist and mental health counselor. And have specialized mostly in trauma work with people with a lot of different populations. I've worked in the prison system. I've worked with queer youth who don't have housing. I've worked with people with severe mental illness. So a breadth of people, always with adolescents or adults. And when I graduated from school and I got my first job at a community agency, I was tasked with seeing adolescents a lot and in the afternoon because it's not when they're at school. And one of the things I noticed at the time, so this was like 20 years ago, at the time I wasn't allowed to talk to them about basic nutrition or include that in sort of an assessment of how what they're doing and what they're getting. And it really occurred to me because I would find out that, this 13-year-old who has a pretty stressful life is coming at the end of the day to counseling, and um, they have eaten maybe a donut all day long and probably had no water. And so that's when I started bringing protein bars and water into my office because in that regard, there was no amount of talk therapy or art therapy that was going to make much of a difference because their physical system wasn't able to retain information or think very clearly or just settle down a little bit in order to do any of that other tough trauma work. And so today it's much different. People can get certifications in nutrition and mental health. So that's really exciting. And it also has, it's caught up with what I noticed 20 years ago and wanted to be doing with people, which was a more holistic approach of, let's look at sleep and diet and water and movement and, all of those things along with mental health and thought processes and ways that we can work together to resolve the trauma so that your system calms down and you can do something else with your energy.
I love
So I
that.
hope that answered the question.
Yes, just I really wanted you to talk about that background because it's such a wealth of information and experience to bring to the topic of healing trauma. I mean, nutrition,
Mhm,
we don't really think about how that affects our mental health.
mhm, mhm.
We know that the body stores the trauma, but we don't think about how what we eat might make things worse.
Right. I tell people, like, there's a whole part of us that connects this to the rest of us, there's a whole body part that connects the head to the body. And yet there's still a lot in our culture that it's definitely, um, we've grown, as a culture and as a society in that regard. There's a lot more mindfulness that's even brought into psychology and really evidence-based practices that involve a lot of mindfulness, which includes, what's going on in your body right now and how is that connected to the thoughts that you're having. And the nutrition piece is, in my opinion, it's really a vital piece of the pie of healing, because because stress affects how our bodies function. It affects our immune systems and our digestive systems and our sleep and our nervous systems, and vice versa. So you can't really pull one out and not pay attention to the other one and have the best, like, supportive healing situation that you can.
Yeah, so our audience tends to be people in extremely stressful situations over people and just their lives and things they care about the most being threatened. So their
Mm-hmm.
families, their money, their future, and they
Mm-hmm.
tend to be in it because we deal with clients and a community who are, many of whom are domestic violence survivors or victims,
Mm-hmm.
and they're stuck in the legal system for years.
Mm-hmm.
They're dealing with prolonged stress. So it's not just
Right.
intermittent stress. It's like this survival mode state that can last often for years. What are the effects of that kind of stress on someone's body?
Right. So when you and I talked before, and one of the reasons I was so excited to get to know you was because of your awareness of, yeah, this is a part of what your clients deal with all the time. Um, and my clients, I've tended to work with people for long term, around complex trauma, the effects of the PTSD that last, decades sometimes. Um, so the nervous system is one. So our nervous system has, kind of, think of two gears, has a low gear and a high gear. And the parasympathetic nervous system is the low gear. And when we're relaxed and safe and not feeling like we're under threat, that system is in play. We're in that gear. And that is when our bodies can route the energy that they have towards sleep and relaxation and digesting food and, fueling our immune systems and repairing damaged cells and healing, clear thinking. All of those things are fed by the energy of our bodies when able to relax and have that parasympathetic nervous system engaged. When we perceive a threat or we're under threat, our body shifts gears and our nervous system goes into high gear, which is sympathetic nervous system gear. And that's the fight, flight, faint. That's like the signal is sent, danger, get it together, be on alert, right? And in a best case scenario for our survival, that, like you mentioned, right, that's a short term state to be in, because once the crisis or the threat is completed, then our bodies can shift back down into parasympathetic nervous system. Often, fatigue, like taking a nap or, being really tired, is just our body and our mind's natural way to account for the excitement and the stress and the threat that happened, right? Then we have, so that's all very short term, but when that threat is sustained, over time, all those things I mentioned, right? Digestion doesn't happen very well. So I'm sure that many of your clients experience dysregulation, either constipation or diarrhea, and just a mess digestively. And immune system doesn't work properly. And those two things are connected. Most of the cells that run our immune system are in our digestive tract. So those two are connected. Sleep, so we're not able to sleep, because that threat,
For years,
right?
years.
Right. Yeah. And when I've had times of trauma, and I have my own personal experience with some pretty severe PTSD a couple times in my life, and that has, recurred. And yeah, sleep just is completely disrupted, right? Well, without sleep, all those other things can't happen very well, like digestion and clear thinking. And that sleep time is when healing happens in the body. It's when the liver does its job to eliminate toxins. So being under a sustained level of threat, biologically, neurobiologically, um, disrupts all those systems. In the long term, those become diseases often, right? So chronic fatigue, Crohn's disease, digestive issues that develop then into a chronic disease because there's never a relaxation, because it's just sustained on alert, right? And so symptoms of PTSD are exactly that. It's the even the main maybe actual threat is resolved some, but there's reminders all the time of the threat. And so it just reignites that system again. And then you're, on hyper alert again. And for your clients, right, even having to continue to do legal stuff, like every single time, it just reignites that whole system because it's a reminder of all the past stress and trauma, and so it just keeps looping, and so that is really, really hard on our bodies.
Yeah, I know. Well, I've told you I've been in the system. It's now year 10. Luckily, things really turned a corner this past year, but I saw changes. I mean, insomnia was like a given, just all the time trying to process the injustice and the rage and why, and what can I do differently? And it's how can this be happening? But another thing that I noticed was in order to deal with the stress, I was doing a lot of exercising, a lot of really active exercising. But what I thought was really strange was that I was gaining weight. So even though I was doing this intense exercise,
Right.
I was like, why am I gaining weight? Like this doesn't make
Right.
any sense. So that was another thing of like, and so I remember when I was seeing a trauma therapist years ago in the beginning, she said, you're doing a lot of really active things and that's great, but you're not doing enough quiet. You're not, I mean, I love to read, but in general, I'm not a person who just sits still for long unless I'm reading or really focused. But she's like, you have to start doing quiet things as well as like the kickboxing and hip hop dancing and running and all of that. Does that sound familiar with people
Yep.
that you deal with?
Yep. That sounds familiar. And I've gotten myself backed into that corner before as well, where because exercise is like a conscious on purpose way to activate the sympathetic system to get into that higher gear. And so it can definitely be stress relieving because it's more of an excitement. It's not a threat. Right. So it activates that, and then it's over. So then we come down. But exercising in a way that also kind of feeds that, just not getting the rest part, right, then just kind of maintains the disruption. So exercise is a really great coping mechanism, and to balance it with the other things is important, just to realize that is a way that I'm shifting gears high again, and I want to make sure that I get into that low gear at some point, because then the mental processing and the emotional processing of the trauma is much harder to do because there's never a rest point, right? So it's affecting digestion and immune system and sleep and all of those things. It's also inhibiting my ability to process and move through the actual trauma itself,
Wow, it
right?
makes
Because
so much
I'm
sense.
always on alert and looking out. I can't drop in and focus on something and come back out because everything is dysregulated, right?
Thank you for giving me permission now to think, well, maybe I don't have to run as much if I'm doing the others. Maybe I could just take walks sometimes.
Right, there's a lot of ways to move, right? Yeah, there's a lot of choices in movement, and the groups that I run uh, that are focused on healthy habits and um, always include something about how we're eating each day, something about sleep each day, something about de-stressing each day, something about moving each day, and that can be a lot of things.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. We know that sleep is necessary. We know that sleep is really hard for people in situations like mine and our communities. What are some other ways that people might be able to relax and get that downtime without
Mhm.
actual sleep? I mean, we try, but it's broken.
Right, right. Yeah, and depending on how the uh, trauma symptoms are manifesting, sleep becomes even more complicated because if I'm experiencing nightmares or night terrors while I'm sleeping, then I don't even want to go to sleep,
Mhm.
because then that's good, and then I'm just so that loop is really difficult to deal with. But I'm, fatigued. I know I need sleep, but then when I go to sleep, right? So that's really difficult to deal with. What I've done myself in my own experiences and what I help my clients do is broaden the idea of what the relaxation is. So the goal is to engage the parasympathetic nervous system, which doesn't have to be sleep, right? And so um, acupuncture is a great. My acupuncturist described acupuncture one time, and I was dealing with PTSD, and this was really helpful for me. And I was commenting or something, and she reflected back to me that acupuncture is like being meditated instead of meditating. And
Mm.
I thought that was such a brilliant way to describe it because it's very passive. I don't have to do anything. The other person is the active person, and the treatment helps engage my parasympathetic nervous system, but I don't have to count breaths. I don't have to do anything but lay there. Um, or sit there, whatever's most comfortable for me. So, yeah, so looking for ways to engage that parasympathetic nervous system that's not necessarily sleep, not necessarily what people often think of as meditation. People often think of that as a really formal practice where you have to sit completely still and be silent. And for folks who deal with anxiety and people who are in a pretty active have pretty active PTSD symptoms, that quiet isn't easy to get because there's so much mind chatter, right?
Mhm.
And so
Oh,
it just sort of, yeah, right? It eliminates one layer of background noise or fuzz, and that just highlights all the activity that's going on right under the surface that is uncomfortable. So, it doesn't have to be for a long time, and it doesn't have to be just sitting still quietly. So walking, moving, um, dance in a creative, sort of free way. I'm an art therapist, so my clients, that's one of the things about coming into the studio and engaging in um, art medium in a certain way with my guidance is that I can see them drop. I can see their parasympathetic nervous system kick in, and they got 10 minutes of that sweet silence, that sweet quiet, you called it, right? Without all the interruptions. And so, a little bit at a time, just to help their whole system reset and get some real rest, because that rest is for the brain as well as the body.
yeah, it makes sense. Now, you had
Mm.
talked about in our private conversation the need to be consistent.
Mhm. Yeah, well, most things being consistent is helpful, right?
Yeah.
One step at a time, but one step every day, right? Over
Uh-huh.
and
Like
over and
even
over and over
10
and over
minutes?
again. Even 10 minutes, I mean, I've worked with people that where 10 minutes is too long. I've actually had my own experience where um, I have been able to listen even to meditations and meditate and maybe read and do quiet, like read something inspirational, something that's not work related, have, quiet spaces for long periods of time. And then when I've experienced a trauma and all of that anxiety and the hypervigilance and my system is just on high alert, I don't have the tolerance for it anymore, and I'm unable to do it, and it's really difficult to create my own quiet. And so looking for support from other people and other methods to have the quiet sort of come to me for little bits at a time. So for me, acupuncture at that time in my life was really important because it was quiet that came to me and I didn't have to, and then the rest of the time, because of the way that my mind was so agitated as I was working through that, I always had music. I always had some kind of talking, or there was always something going on in the background. It
Mhm.
was really difficult for me to have it be quiet unless I was, at the acupuncturist office, or um, in a group where there was, people actually helping hold the space for 5 minutes of sitting together and not having anything to do but breathe,
Mhm.
or having somebody cue, like, it's okay right now, tell all the chatter in your head, that you're aware that it's there and it has something important that it thinks needs to happen. And right now, for this 1 minute, just let it know that there's nowhere that it has to be, and there's nothing that has to happen right now. Just breathing right now for 1 minute. That's all that has to happen. So finding ways to have your external environment in some way support the quiet, even for a few minutes at a time, and then make it a regular practice, and it starts to shift and it starts to expand, or other things start to be able to be possible. So,
Yes.
and I don't even know if daily, I mean, I have a client who started out saying that they hated art therapy, but they could see that it worked. And I'm pretty sure that for, I don't know, maybe a couple years, the art therapy sessions were regular. So that was once a week, where there was a few minutes of downtime for that person's system, and maybe not a lot in between those sessions. Um, so uh,
Yeah.
I've had people, whatever creates that a safety moment, and to do what works for them. So I had a client one time that having meals delivered, having food delivered to the house was something that counteracted like childhood trauma that tied into adult trauma.
Mhm.
And the insight they had was that there was just a good feeling of being taken care of. It didn't even really matter if they ate it or not,
Oh,
right?
yeah, that makes sense though. Boy, I would
Right.
love, because I don't cook, I love when people give me food.
Right. So that was like, aha, okay. So, and it supported them eating better to have a food service, right? So it checked off, a few things, including that emotional safety just for a moment. I've been taken care of, the food got delivered. So a moment of relaxation and well-being that lets that gear lower.
Listening to you, Delane, I'm like, "Okay, I gotta go back to the acupuncturist." I've only gone once in my life, but I bet it would be a great thing to do, almost like getting a massage. And as a
Uh-huh.
non-cook, yes, I should order food and not feel guilty. And
Yeah.
take walks and make sure to do some of those quiet things.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
love listening to audiobooks too. So what you said
There you
about
go.
sounds in the background, it's hard for me
Mhm.
to concentrate on certain things when there's somebody talking, but when I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't go to sleep, I found that turning on a boring audiobook, or it depends on the voice. I really love female voices with British or Irish accents. I don't know why. It's so soothing.
So I have Spanish speaking. That's so funny. Yeah. So if I'm, in order to fall asleep, and I have my routines and I have different, product supports that I use from my store, and so I have a lot of options, and sometimes that, like, 10-minute meditation by someone speaking in Spanish is just the thing.
Yeah, that's
Out.
great. I know, I speak Spanish, that sounds great, but I don't like, I've tried some of the guided meditations, but sometimes the voice can ruin it. If it's the wrong
Mhm.
voice, I just get so judgmental, and I
Mhm.
I I have to turn it off because 'cause I'm like, "Oh,
Right.
come on, this is too fake."
Right. Yeah, it has to resonate. It doesn't matter if somebody else, if that hits their safety nurturing button or not. It has to, genuine and authentic. Um, and so I work a lot to meet people where they're at, both on what kind of nutrition program are we going to put into place for you? What's your capacity right now for making any changes? Because even making a change is a little bit stressful, right? Even if it's a
Mm,
small change. So one thing at a time, you know, so whether it's on the nutrition side or whether it's on a, like a mindfulness practice, it needs to fit. I've had clients, um, affirmations
mhm.
are a tricky one, right? Because they can be very fake. And the response, and I have this sometimes, the response of like, that's not true. That's, stupid, or that
Yeah,
doesn't apply to me, or,
right.
it's a lie, right? So, so I help people craft their own empathic statement or their own affirmation that actually fits for them, that makes sense, right? And then the same on the nutrition side. Um, for example, I worked with somebody who had childhood trauma around food,
Mhm.
and definitely affected them in their adult life in major ways with lots of health issues. And I think that this person, for most of their life, had since they were a toddler at least, had never gone a day without processed sugar, right?
Mhm.
So I facilitate a 7-day healthy cleanse, and our team does that, and it's great. And there's a lot of ways to do it. You can do it just like the directions say, or modify it to fit you. And I'm big on the modifications for people because I want them to grow. I don't want them to shut down and have a miserable experience, right? I want them to be supported. So for this person, they didn't do anything that the directions said, because
Mhm.
their one goal, as I coached them, that took a while because they were stuck on, I have to do it this way. I was like, you don't have to do it that way. Let's find out, what do you care about the most? What's going to be the most important for you? And it was sugar. I want to go 7 days without sugar. So I know a little bit about what they ate that week, but but really the only thing I absolutely know, and I think they used all this, supplements for happy digestion and liver, The
Mhm.
one thing I do know was accomplished was no sugar for 7 days,
Wow, and
right?
that's a lot for someone who's
It
never.
was a lot, and it was a significant change, and they felt more energy, and, they kind of couldn't believe it. Like they still had energy after work kind of thing, and some of their pain went away. And yeah, so in that respect, a little bit of commitment with the right step for somebody can be enough traction, right, to really kind of turn the Titanic a little bit, and just then build on that traction. Let yourself really get the hang of that step before you start adding other things.
Yeah, I mean, sugar, I don't know if I'm remembering properly, but I feel like I've heard people say that sugar can be more addictive than cocaine.
Yeah, it has a lot of detrimental effects. Refined sugars mess with our systems quite a bit, and our whole system, inflammatory response, joints, digestive, brain health. I mean, we need natural sugars for our brain to function. It's not that all sugar is bad, but the refined high fructose and a lot of it, it's like a little bit goes a long way, but like the foods that are available, it, in most grocery stores and just kind of around are really filled with it. So it's
Mhm.
way over the top. Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's a dopamine response to there's a biochemical brain response with sugar. So it does have the trick, like the same trick of nicotine, right? I mean, nicotine creates anxiety and nervousness, but in the short term, for something that was just felt stressful, it calms it just for a few minutes.
Hmm.
So sugar is similar. It does comfort, like actually
Yeah,
comfort,
I mean, and you think of all the,
but for a
associations.
short period of time. Yeah.
Right, but I think about childhood and candy shops
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
bakeries and
Mhm.
desserts. And before I forget, the thing that you mentioned with affirmations, we also um, help people do affirmations. We don't really call it that. We just call it post-it notes, but it's
That's
more,
great. I like that.
yeah, it's never like the woo stuff. It's more like
Right.
I'm nobody's bleep, depending on the person. Or
Right,
like
exactly.
we did one earlier with someone who was like, I have skills. Like she's negotiating with a very difficult ex and has a background in negotiation. Like a really skilled business person, but can't seem to think that that could affect the possibilities, and influence
Mhm.
making progress in this divorce. And we were like, just put it on a post-it note. I have skills. Like your
Right,
skills will directly impact your case in a
right.
wonderful way because you're trained for this. So you just haven't been able to do it because of the dynamic and the coercive
Mhm,
control, but
mhm,
you
mhm.
will start to be able to use them. It'll start falling into
Right.
place.
Yeah, I love that. I love that kind of thing. I've posted notes all over my house and people come over and laugh. Sometimes people add to them, which is fun.
Oh, that does sound fun.
Friends come
Yeah, the
over
other
and
thing we use Post-it notes are for virtual court appearances. We say, put it over your ex's face and draw something funny.
oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah, we love Post-its. But anyway, so talking about all of this, I kept thinking about filling up a gas tank. Like, what can you do to fill up your gas tank? Like to put yourself in the best health, mind, body as much as possible, especially because you are speaking to people that they can't get the rest and the break time
Mhm,
as easily
mhm,
as others because they
mhm.
are in survival mode.
Right. Well, that's one. Explore ways that at this point in whatever your healing journey is and living with the trauma, at this point, what helps your nervous system get into that lower gear, even for a few minutes? So find the thing that works for you and know that it will change and that's okay. Just how can you get a little bit of that now and do that again? So make that a regular. In our groups, we use habit trackers. So and when I was a kid, I had star charts for like chores and stuff, and I got gold stars on
Uh-huh.
the chart. And so I don't know if it was just that or if it inherently just works for me, but I love the habit trackers.
Uh-huh.
So, and of course, we do it without judgment. Like you either, you got them all. It's more like a guide and just kind of a feedback loop for myself, right? How am I doing today? Is there something I forgot, to do? And the habits are, did I eat breakfast that included protein? Did I drink water? Did I move in some way that was intentional, like I walked around the block or I just did some stretching or something, right? So tracking, what it is that you want to implement and make sure there's something, like read the post-it note or, use your post-it notes could be on the tracker for your community. Um, so engaging that parasympathetic nervous system, protein, hugely, hugely important, and water, hugely important. And at the beginning of the day, so I know it's difficult to eat, being in fight or flight and trauma response is sort of it's everything's dysregulated. So it's sort of all or nothing a lot, right? And so sometimes it's like eating the whole bag of potato chips and just wanting sugar and just like I give up, I can't and then there's be like no eating, I can't eat at all and I've lost 10 pounds in a week and
Mhm.
that's so it's all over the place. So really getting a good source of clean protein early in the day is a great way to help stabilize mind and body and going into whatever the day is going to bring. It help blood sugar, blood pressure, I mean all of the things, the brain, like it just helps with everything. And find a way that works for you now to do that. So in my most stressful times in life, even the worst times of PTSD symptoms for me, I was always had my Shaklee protein shake.
Mhm.
in the morning. I may not have had anything else,
What's in it? Like, what
but
kinds
at
of
least I
things?
had that, you know.
Yeah.
Protein, fiber, vitamin, minerals, tastes great. It's easy, you know, it can be easy, and I have a lot of recipes because I like to cook. So
Mhm.
sometimes that, you know, I get a little fancy with it and I have, you know, gourmet versions, but I also just have throw it in the shaker cup and run out the door version.
Mhm.
And so I just know like that helps. I can feel my brain like come online,
Mhm.
right? And I can feel my system calm down a little, right? And just like kind of have a grounding. It's grounding. So, so that's important. There's, you know, we work really holistically and try not to do too much targeted response nutritionally, like get the foundation going. And protein and water, it's a great foundation. Get that going and see how you're doing. And then if you want to get more specific, that being said, um, stress in our bodies, it gobbles up B vitamins. So sometimes you might hear people refer to B vitamins as the stress vitamin because when stress happens, our bodies just use it all up. And it's water soluble, so we have to eat it all the time. We have to put it in because it doesn't last very long. And so that's something that people could be curious about if they're going to look at supplementation or they're going to go to a naturopath or something and they're dealing with a lot of this chronic stress is to look at, you know, that may be really low or in the
Mm.
toilet as far as,
Interesting.
um, you know, blood nutrient levels, kinds of things like that. Fun and play.
I wrote that on my notes, fun. You can't really see it,
Fun
but
and play.
yeah, I was like, when is she gonna talk about that? I'm gonna remind her if she forgets.
Fun and play. Right. There is, I mean, regardless of trauma and symptoms, just being human, right? We have a tendency, we're built to look for danger. So then when there really is danger or perceived threat, then that's just, you know, like a heyday for that part of our minds that is built to look for danger so we can survive. And so that can cause kind of a tunnel vision, right? And missing that there's like there's a tree outside or missing that there's a lovely sound of wind or there's music in the next room or children laughing or you know that I can smell something, right? Because this checking with senses is really grounding. And when we get that tunnel vision and we go into defensive modes, it we our radar is off of all of those things that are grounding and expansive. And that and play is in that expansive place is play and curiosity and wondering what I can learn from this as opposed to thinking I'm horrible or thinking there, you know, getting into those arguments with myself and others in the world, the no win loop arguments, right? So any way to jiggle that loose and play um, helps. And that parasympathetic nervous system, like when people are really playing, it's an innocence and it's a form of safety and nurturing. So fun and play is important. Um, kindness and gratitude, even if other people aren't doing it that way. That's a great piece that can also, you know, help shift into a different gear that's a little more open and a little bit more relaxed. The last period of time that I had in my life where I was experiencing a lot of hypervigilance and tension and the no sleeping and the eating all over the place. I had a friend of a family that was going through a dying process with one of their family members, and they asked me to cook for them once a week. And there were a couple weeks, it lasted a little more than a year, and there were definitely a couple weeks where gathering the ingredients, putting together a menu, and cooking that meal for them was the only time I got out of bed.
Wow.
Was the reason to get out of bed. It was so, um, you know, it engaged me in something creative for me, which was the cooking part, but it also had that altruism and kindness and gratitude wrapped up in it because I was giving to somebody else. And
Mhm.
so that helped me get a little hit of a lower gear and something that, was active enough. Yeah. So, however, people can create those moments of creativity and play, color, dance, read a children's book. I, I always figured my true talent was brainstorming. So if anybody listening wants a brainstorming session, just
I
find me.
love brainstorming. You're the first person I've met besides myself that says, "I love brainstorming." I love it.
Yeah, let's just generate a bunch of ideas. And even that, right? So um a lot of criticism comes in on board very quickly when we're trying to survive. Because our brains are like, nope, that's not going to work. Yep, nope. It's this like intense sorting and criticizing and judging process in order to find what looks like the right thing, right? And that cuts out the brainstorming, which is a creative process also. And if there's brainstorming happening and there's not some jokes and some honest human condition laughter and silliness, then it's not really brainstorming, right?
Yeah.
so
Oh my gosh.
so
I love hearing you say that. That yeah,
yeah,
that's true. Brainstorm. When you're describing the judgment, I don't have that issue when I'm brainstorming at
when
all.
you're brainstorming, yeah, so
Yeah,
that's a
it's like,
place
let's
for
just
you.
see.
Right,
It's
that's a
yeah.
place for you that has some freedom to it, right? Which is, anything that opens up, feels a little freer, the tension shifts a little bit. Notice breathing, even that being aware of when I'm holding my breath, and as soon as I notice it, just stop holding my breath. I mean, so there's a meditation that can happen anywhere, anytime.
Yeah. Yeah, I
That
mentioned, I think I told you about a book I had read several months ago called The Power of Fun by Catherine
yes.
Grace. And so and I recommend it to everybody, but she talks about the importance of fun and that she says there's really two underlying factors that you should think about when she recommends fun. So people can have fun by themselves, but for the health benefits and everything else, she says that if you're trying to like get full benefit, it should be doing something with other people and be in a uninterrupted so you can get what's called flow.
Mm.
And so I was
Yeah.
just thinking
Hmm.
last night, my daughter is about to go off overseas for a semester abroad in Australia. And so I'm going to miss her, but she's been home in between the college semesters and
Hmm.
she likes trying different kinds of dance. So I do hip hop. She usually does ballroom dance at college, but there's this group that meets that does Western line dancing. And we're not in the part of
That's
the country where
fantastic.
people generally do that. So she's like, Mom, you want to go, Monday, do you want to go with me to the line dance? And I was kind of like, oh, like I just had this really busy day and I'm overwhelmed with work and I want to catch up. But you know what? She's
Yep.
going away. We had the last time we went, my ankle was sprained and I couldn't really try it. So I'm going to go. So we go to this like church basement. There's 70 something people, all different
Oh
ages.
my
The
God.
guy in the cowboy hat, and he's doing these simple country steps, and I'm kind of like, whatever. But it was so much fun, and just
Hmm.
learning those steps and having to pay attention
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
the people in front of me, and every time we
Right.
shifted direction, and I was like, wow, that time just flew by. And that
Right.
was really cool because now I have 4 different dances that I'm not going to remember, but I can get the charts from the guy's
Hmm.
website.
Hmm.
And I think I'm going to come back and just to do it. It was really neat. It was all different ages.
It's
Just
fantastic.
yeah,
I want to
I thought
come.
yeah, you're welcome to. It was great. And then the
Right.
other thing
Right.
I wanted to touch on that you said was the importance of kindness and gratitude. And you
Mhm.
have to think about how that the hit that we get from giving to others, like when I find a gift for somebody that I'm not looking for and I know that it's just
Mhm.
perfect for them and it screams, I get so happy and so
Mhm.
excited because of the anticipation of like seeing their face and knowing that it's going to make them happy.
Mhm.
That's why they say the giver ends up getting more than the receiver.
Absolutely.
So I'm really glad that you mentioned kindness and gratitude, because that does give you like a hit of dopamine, especially
Mhm.
with I think sometimes homemade things or creative gifts, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the cook, but cooking for other people and just doing something that someone doesn't expect, but it's
Right.
just going to make their day. And
Right.
I found you can do that in little ways too, like complimenting a stranger. My other
Mm-hmm.
side business is in fashion. And so I find that fashion is often an opportunity for people to get to know each other, especially when someone
Mm.
is wearing what I call a compliment grabber, like something kind of unusual.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it elicits someone else to be like, wow, that's really neat. Like, where did you get
Yep.
it? Oh, these earrings are from. So think about
Mm-hmm.
giving a stranger a compliment, even for a tiny
Right.
little hit of dopamine.
Yeah. The flow that you mentioned is totally in my whole realm as an art therapist. Creativity is essential part of the healing process,
Mhm.
however that shows up. And part of it is that flow, which is parasympathetic nervous system engaged, right? Where time just passes and the regular stuff is just lifted and there's a groove and it's freedom and it doesn't matter for that time period, right? And so yeah, finding ways that are maybe contained or structured, because it will happen more if the setting, if there's an intention for it and it's set up like that, like when you go to the dance thing, somebody is setting the stage for that and
Mhm.
giving enough guidance and direction so that you don't have to think about all that stuff. You just do
Exactly.
it, right?
Yeah.
Something that's repetitive, something that, we have a free community art studio here. And so every Saturday from 2 to 5, people can drop in and use the studio. So, it, it's a space that they can get to know and it's timed by somebody else.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. And to me,
so
that's
that can be important.
yeah, it's different. It's different. And Catherine Price talks about it in The Power of Fun. Relaxation, like taking nice hot showers and bath salts, or, all that, that's not the same as fun.
Right.
That's nice,
Right.
but that's different. And that
Right.
we do need fun. We do need that engagement and interaction,
Hmm. Yeah,
and
yeah,
especially
and
after the pandemic.
right after the pandemic, and when somebody has lived, with chronic PTSD for a really long time and hasn't had a decent night's sleep in 20 years, finding ways to create joy and fun it's something that I look for on the therapist side of, because when that starts to come back online for somebody, I know that there's traction, that the healing is happening, because some situations are just devoid of it, and people can't even think, they can't even imagine what joy would be like anymore. It's so
Yeah.
foreign, right?
We,
So yeah,
one
it
of our go ahead.
reigniting that, like just getting that back online, healthy sense of humor and joy. It's
Yeah,
important.
you just reminded me. So one of our clients obviously was like super stressed out, and I had recently read the book Power of Fun, and I said for her to read it, but I said, you have to promise me that over this weekend you take 15 minutes and you just do something, whatever it is.
Hmm.
So she
Hmm.
really didn't want to, but she did it because she knew she'd get in trouble if she didn't do it. So she said her job had some kind of volleyball team. So she showed up, and I guess she used to play volleyball years before this toxic relationship. So she showed up, and it turned out that it was the wrong day. So there were only like a handful of people there, and it was like, oh no, she tried, but then they ended up playing volleyball, and I believe she got like really muddy and dirty, and she loved it and was like, you know
Yeah.
what, I'm so glad I
Yeah.
went. And that started
Yep.
the habit where it was like, you know what, I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to do it
Hmm.
again. And
Hmm.
I hope that
Hmm.
it is still part of the routine
Hmm.
for her. But it
Hmm.
was like being forced to do something and then getting that groove back and realizing, you
Hmm.
know what, this was me before and I love this. And maybe I gave it up for a long time, but I love this. I'm going to go
Right.
back to doing this.
Right. And that's a great point. Think about what you did when you were a kid
Mhm.
that felt fun, and reconnect with some part of you that hasn't gotten to come out and play for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that
It's
you recommended reading a children's book
yeah,
too.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we in our groups that are about healthy habits, and um nutritionally based, every month we have a free one that anybody can attend, and then we have some that are for customers only. They all have a fun component. There's silly prizes and there's drawings, and some of them are even. I think the most fun one is Eat the Rainbow because it's. I mean, it's just fun to try and eat the rainbow.
Uh-huh.
So,
That sounds
right.
really neat.
So it's just inherently kind of a game, right? It's a game to play every day. So
Uh-huh.
we are definitely our intention is to make sure that that's in what we're doing.
That's great. So,
Yeah.
Delane, how can people find you?
How can people find me?
Yes, and like,
Um,
what can you offer them? Because you've touched on it a little bit, but just give them a
right.
little.
Probably, well, Instagram and Facebook. The business name is Due for a Change. And so there's a page, and those are probably the most reliable ways to know what's coming up. Like next month on the 18th, I think that's a Sunday. It's the day before our next customer group starts. We're doing a 21-day program. And so that day before is a cooking hive that I host. So that is, you be in your kitchen wherever you are, and you just set up your device so that you can join in the Zoom room. And I have my computer on top of my refrigerator so you can see me. And we're cooking together. It's that sit around the kitchen table and talk kind of thing, tell stories, cook, trade recipes, that kind of thing. So we have regular free groups that are like one time like that, just pop in,
Mhm.
or that maybe last 5 days. So probably the Due for a Change Facebook and Instagram are the best ways to have up to date, and you flag me down, through one of those, and I'll pick it up. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much and I think we've been on for almost an hour and the time flew. So I was having
It
lots
did fly.
of fun. But
Me
thank you
too.
so much for coming on and sharing this. And I have a feeling that what you do can really help a lot of people in our community.
Thank you so much, because this is really such a sweet spot for me. So I really, really appreciate the opportunity to get to kind of synthesize, these two career paths that I've
Mhm.
had and really synthesize them. And, yeah, as we talked before, the lights just went on. I was like, oh, this is a place where I could really help people and, pull all the things together to really support people in some basic things that are not always easy to accomplish.
Yeah, I love that
So
you
I
have the
really love it.
nutrition along with the therapy, the
Hmm.
therapist background.
Yeah.
All
So,
right.
yeah, thank you so much for picking the ball up with me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we'll have to do this again.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, take care.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.